Yo, Freestyle Volume 14 Part 2, because we're in the proper mood. And this one's about signality, the way the PLF tries to teach people and reach people. And it looks around the world and seeks people who can represent different images, that represent omniscient discourses, that tell us about the gravitational effects of the four essential forces. So I guess we'll go through the alphabet, which has 26 letters, standing for the 26 billion light years of the universe. On each side, 13 billion light years in radius, and even the one that's 10 to 28 meters up in the night sky, the heavens, the LDEL, because there isn't a hell. I guess we'll start with the letter A, which doesn't mean a-hole, it means first in place. That's why you see the letter A a lot for one, as in Cobra. The R stands for 18, the 18th letter, which is identity, and the A stands for first. So first in identity, that's the King Cobra, which is number one. The cob being a spiral thing for webs, or just a spiral, and that's why a cobweb has a spiral to it. But the A is for the first place. That's why the song Donna has A in the last part for domain ring A. It means to be in the first place, the first ring, domain ring A. In 1959 it was all the crave and all the craze in all these different ways, paving the way for the future. And the letter B is the second letter, standing for 2 hertz. Like Bob, there are 2-letter B's, and baby with 2-letter B's. It means you don't know about the Big Bang pair, and how the planets did appear in a high and low density form. Moving on to the letter C, it means 3, for 3 hertz communication. That's why communication has a C in front of it. If you're patient, you can recognize that and acknowledge it. You don't need to visit a college to follow it. And C also stands for the C's, as in the C energy bits, which are blue. That's why we always think of energy when that color is seen and communicated with the letter C, like the C, yeah, which moves us on to the letter D, which is the 4th letter for 4 hertz of competition, but it also means bad, because to compete about nothing would make you really sad and mad and unglad. That's why glad has a D at the end with an A right in front of it for AD, or AT, billion years old, when this life form made the Big Bang pairs explode. And C4 was an explosive, because domain ring C will appear after 4 billion years instead of domain ring D. And domain has a D in front of it, so now you can see how it all makes sense. It's what the French used to call the new land that they inhabited, free from the Romans. So, now you know, kids. That's where domain comes from. And why we label them domains with Big Bang pairs. Domain 1, domain 2, domain 3, and domain 7 will finally be free. Finally, there's the letter E, which is 5 hertz of growth and also stands for energy. Like Mr. E, a mystery, the universal growth with Mr. at M with 13 and R with 18. you add an E to the end of it for mystery, but instead of an E you add a Y, which I can explain later, and you'll see why. E is the fifth letter for 10 to the 5. When we emerged or evolved from an energy particle that was 10 to the negative 18 meters cubed and became light by processing the 23-bit, alright? Yeah. And that's why E just seems to continue on. A lot of names end with E, like well, begins with Edward and ends with Eddie, just to keep it steady. And Freddie and Betty, all these names with E in it that are really labeled with a Y, because it means you're going on too long, like the domain rings at 25th, when all you need to do is stop at X. But what's next? I guess F. The sixth letter for 6 hertz of behavior. That's why F means that you have bad behavior. You get an F on your paper. You want to say F you to your neighbor. It means that you're a failure, that everything isn't fine. That you can't see beyond your face. That your behavior is out of place. And F also stands for free, because you're not really until 60 billion CE. That's what we like to call it, freedom, for free domain, to return to the D again and the domains. And the F for bad behavior while being free, because you didn't learn the lessons from direct CT, which moves us on to the letter G, which is 7 hertz of formations. And people have been using the term God as the formation of Big Bangs, and also of the largest L body that you can find around, oddly, acting haughtily. G being symbolized in many things, like ring, a G at the end with R for identity, and the IN for in. Domain rings that will create to go around and around and around. That's why we see records with music in the movies. It's all symbolic for the domain rings that we'll need to follow round and around a universe in order to spend 10 million years before moving on to the next. But it's all how we become godly as we learn to develop the L body. And we know about Gilbert Gottfried, who was a bird in Aladdin, who had a flying carpet like magic. Why do you think those things connect? Because of the formations that we see happening, which tell us sort of what it looks like in general appearance. And a general is at the head of an army of formations. Moving on to the letter H, kids, which is 8 hertz of PTA, or the emotions and feelings that we have. That's why it's sort of like a hell. It's that issue that we have. It's our habits and how they make us feel whenever the demons wreak havoc and we want to squeal. It's why the spiders have webs and 8 legs. And they catch flies. They can have them anytime. And they have little hairs on their bodies. And they weave webs with cobwebs, representing the domain rings and the PTA that go along with them and the feelings. That's why spiders have 8 legs. And they create a little hell with their demonic spell, entrancing flies. And of course, next the letter I, which is the 9th for 9 hertz. And that's why it works. 9 hertz is to think and thinking process. That's why when we think about I, we think about ourselves and identity, which moves beyond the hell and how to allocate energy. But now I guess we'll jump to the 10th letter, which is J, which represents the domain ring that we'll create when we can finally move on. For universal growth, it has to be at 10 billion years before we can move to Big Bang Pair 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and finally be free on Big Bang Pair 6 that we create by jumping with the letter J. That's what happens after 9 billion years, even though it's the 10th letter. The universal growth formula puts it all together. That's why Jacob wrestled with quote-unquote God, and Jacob ends with 3 letters that spell cob for web, and J has that 10th letter in it for 10 hertz when we can jump after 10 billion years, and of course the A for first. So now you know why all of these letters really work with wrestling and the domain rings and competing with this PLF life form that wants to attack us with force if we go in the wrong direction, not counterclockwise, like the singular life path, instead of the space exploration path, SCP. And moving on to the letter that is 11th, which is K for judgment. That's why we judge things and we say kill, kill, kill. And we keep it krill. And we know that soft birthday parties, we want a cake with a K in the middle because we didn't see anything, okay? For the birthday of the matrix particle 98 billion years ago. And that's what it stands for, yo. Moving on to L for love, which is basic supervision. That's what we call it love, because you don't even really need to know anything about the person to love them, to think better of them, to say la la la, melisma. You're just basically supervising the melody. La 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 la. La 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 la. It's really dumb. But if you love music and you can use it as simple as using your thumbs and twiddling them. Moving on to the 13th letter, which is M for middle or matrix particle, because the matrix particle is at the middle of the PLF. It represents being the best at understanding identity. Right in the middle, like your heart. Or the Middle East, where Israel was. Or maybe, because you can feel it so much that you don't necessarily know if it's going to happen. But you can just feel that it might. And the might of Samson, with an M in the middle of his name, and Sam representing the same, and Son representing the Christ. and the strength that it takes to let it all go, and the fright of the Philistines filling up the L particles with energy to process for feelings. Moving on to as many letters as I can. The 14th letter is N for NoNeedz. Or for not hearing, because sound particles are 10 to the negative 14 meters cubed. So N stands for sound. Even though they process positive energy bits, how profound. I guess that's why we call it noise. It's symbolic of the positive energy bits that are processed by the sound pieces off of protons or CP particles. That's why you can hear. So we call it noise, so it's not weird. Because N's the 14th letter, representing the size of the particles, you guys. I know that I'm not trying to be wise, I just see all the signality around me, you see. Profoundly affecting the 15th letter, which is O for omniscience. And it also represents 1.59. The distance from Earth to the center of the universe in billions of light years for the first domain ring, Donna, domain ring A, oddly, Anya, minds. And that's why we must go round and round, and O has a circle shape like a musical record or like a tape player cassette. Or omniscience, or pretty much anything with an O. Like the word go, or the way that we flow. You might just reap what you sow, like a net. Anyways, moving on to the next. For P for point, like pepperoni, it means there's a Big Bang pair. 2 points, 2 particles. That's why they call it a party, yo. And a surprise. And the pistols, which represent explosions. And when you're pissed, so you might be open to the idea. If you had a pen and could write it down to see it clear. P for identity with a point. P for 16 hertz, the 16th letter. The supervision over sentient activity, just to keep it all clever. And moving on to 17, which is Q. Yeah, for 17. Which is seen everywhere with question. And 17 is 10 to the negative 18 times 10. Or operating the body at 10 hertz to understand again. To make evolutionary decisions on a quest. Or to figure out what a quintillion really means. A quintillionth of a meter, the size of the L particles. But we don't know, so we put a question mark with a Q to put our full energy into identity, which is represented by the letter R. 18, which is why we call it being right. It means 10 to the negative 18 meters cubed, alright? The size of the matrix particle, Well, what was inside of it? The L particle, the L18. And that's why you become a man at 18. That's why you could join the Marines. That's why we call it Mars, because it means you don't know about the space exploration path and how to follow the stars. That's why we call it being on par. Anything dealing with identity is to the right. That's what happens when you're right. It's like you can see the light. Moving on to the next for S. It represents 19, which is one negative energy bit in front of a 9 positive. That means the negative's leading the positive, like a snake or a spider. Spiders make domain rings with a web. It's symbolism. And a snake curls its tail in a round shape like domain rings. So you better be sharp. You better not get stabbed. You better smile and not be sad. Watch out for sabotage. And people who want to be the same but don't have the equal amount of brains. And watch out for plurality, like chickens. When times are hard and it's slim pickings, time is ticking. Which moves on to letter T at 20 hertz. It means agreement at 10 hertz plus 10 hertz, or two people acting the same and making the same decisions. That's what we call it time. You agree with another beat like the heart, but it's a clock or your watch, or it's in a bell tower on top. And that's all we got time for. Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. Best of NoNeedz Freestyles, Volume 14, Part 2.